little bit of marketing. I was once told in life that it's always good to begin with a joke. I got nothing. Okay, anyways, um, we're never gonna talk about the fact that that happened or that it will ever happen again. Um, I'll have stuff for the next one. So here's the deal. Here's the deal. We're having dinner, as one does, and I want to talk about rolling up these sleeves. We're going to wrestle with deep and interesting topics, which are things that are influencing the book. That's what we're gonna do. We'll have a moment together. All right. So I have a recreational amateur interest in both recently entomology, now also an amateur entomologist, recreational entomologist. Um, but mathematics uh, is a thing. I actually got really into it during COVID because I was like I've always been bad at it. I was like I'm liberal arts guy like has once worn golden um eyeshadow guy. Who that guy doesn't know math. People don't think that guy knows math. Um, I did have golden eyeshadow at one point, so I was able to educate myself. I got really into it during COVID, and as a result, as a science fiction, technically my genre is science fantasy. Magic Geology the Cornerstone will be science fantasy. So that means, and I guess I'll just take a second to break this down, and I'll use real. We're gonna have a little chat with the computer, using the computer as well. We're in Chat GPT. Um, let's put together a diagnostic metric for the hybridization of science fiction, hard science fiction, and fantasy with a tacit and precise hard magic system that produces 500-word descriptions of the respective games. Right. So then, as a tensor, just to really do that. So that's the question. I'm putting it into ChatGPT now, and that's what we're going to use as as the author, talk about how science fiction and fantasy differ from the genre that is science fantasy. Um, Interestingly enough, I relate a lot to like I watched the entire MCU thing, um, and so I kind of classify that as a science fantasy, but I feel that it has a more soft magic system overall, just the movie representation of it, because it does get a little bit Harry Potter in that there's just like a spell for everything in Doctor Strange, and that's why I say that's kind of a soft magic system. Um, we're gonna ask the question, and I'll continue to talk about this thing. Okay. I built a thing called a diegetic engine, which I use to generate scenes. And I'll talk about that in more detail after we get through this. All right. to construct a diagnostic metric for hybridized hard fiction and fantasy with a tacit internally precise magic system, we treat the narrative architecture itself as a measurable field. So that is something that I'm doing in my work. This is right where you get a little bit to the standard model and things like the Lagrangian, which is this is be recreational math. So I live in Houston. It's one of the most air-conditioned cities in the world. Fun fact. Um, Understanding fields, like in the theory, like the theory behind a field, which to me is just a topological grid permuting all the particles of a certain type. That's pretty much my standard. That's like my go-to definition for what a field is. So when I was writing, and as I'm writing, Magic Geogenesis to the Cornerstone, there are 8 respective fields, 8 respective directions or energetic operations that can occur. And this is the area in which, to me, I call it, like the phrase that is often used when I'm making things is mythotechnical. That's the stage at which, at a certain point in the future, if there's a civilization that only learns things through ritual, they still are capable of the same level of pretty much pioneering or exploring the universe regardless. Like it's the example to me is like um almost, you don't really see it happen with Yoda, like you don't see Yoda just make a Yoda ship. There's no Yoda ship that he just like makes, and it's full of Yodas. Um but that to me would be like the Force equivalent of a purely magical system. Or like Yoda just straight flying it through space, like, and a group of them just flying through space and using the Force to do whatever they needed to do. That's like the full mythic level side of the thing. And then the technical level is what we're used to, giant starship. My story bridges both of those, and those things are occurring in tandem. And that's why I call it, like, that's not what makes it coaxial, but I do see, like, that's where the hybridization between science fiction and fantasy is. Okay, going forward. All right, so index axes, conceptual coordinates. So measures the degree to which a fictional world obeys consistent, falsifiable, or simulation-capable rules. Range 0, mythic arbitrariness, to 1, fully constrained speculative physics. So we're just going to use that one gauge, right? So you have things like, it's rude to use the word arbitrary in the first place because I'm a fantasy reader and I'm like, that's rude. But this is the stage in mythic arbitrariness. I would like this. It sounds like a judgment, but it's not really a judgment. Okay, this is my complaint about Harry Potter, and I love Harry Potter, but this is the thing. Some things in Harry Potter are a little bit mythically arbitrary because it's like there's no necessity. Like the wizards in Harry Potter kind of are born with telekinesis, like by default. You see what I'm saying? Whereas in like something with like comparative, a good comparative thing, in Ender's Game, I would say about like the Ender's Game movie, that would be constrained speculative physics. Like there's machines and stuff there that aren't possible in the normal world, but it's still along the lines of the physics that we understand. In Harry Potter, they're like, I got too angry and my aunt was inflated and she suffered no physical consequences, nor did I have to think about that. Like everything works in such a way that it's like, I'm just doing this because the thing in my mind, not even the thing in my mind, the thing in my emotions said bam. And so that's that first range. So science fantasy look at that would be the spell at some point would have had to have been structured such that the air inside of the person, and sometimes this is done in hard magic stuff by like, a good example. I haven't read the series yet. My best friend uses it all the time though. Sabriel, they have bells, and so it's like you have to ring these bells in a certain order, or the air like turns one into a tornado, she pops, or so on and so forth. It's like that sort of deal. Like it's the actual like in science fantasy, it's the technical details of between spell construction and the actual thing happening that match with the periodic table construction of a thing defining what it is. Like that whole thing should work in science fantasy. It doesn't should work. It's subjective, but works as its own like a little mini. I wouldn't say engine, but kind of like a gasket sort of situation. So I'm gonna stop here. Those are details about how the story is constructed and the type of writing that I'm doing, and I'm going to finish eating. And I will see y'all soon.